Hello and welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to real lawyers about their lives in and out of the practice of law, how they got to be lawyers, and what their experience has been. I'm Louis Goodman, the host of the show, and yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody's perfect. A true son of Alameda County, he has lived, worked, studied, played competitive sports, and raised a family in California. Now practicing criminal law with an emphasis on juvenile justice, he has substantial prosecutorial experience. With a ready smile and great courtroom presence, he effectively represents his clients in all stages of criminal proceedings. Dean Shotwell, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Good morning, Lou. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very happy that you're joining us today. Dean, where's your office located now?
Located in Pleasanton.
How long have you been there?
In Pleasanton, about 20 years. Prior to that, I was in sharing office space in Livermore with an attorney by the name of James McGeorge.
The late, great James McGeorge.
Absolutely.
You're from that area originally, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I was actually born in Livermore a long time ago, and family moved to Pleasanton when I was about 3 years old and lived in Pleasanton primarily my whole life.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Amador Valley High School.
And how was that experience for you?
It was good. You know, the town has changed a lot over the years. It was a very small, primarily agricultural area at the time. But yeah, growing up in Pleasanton was a lot of fun. Attending Amador was a lot of fun. I had a lot of history with the town and the school since my dad actually moved here. His family moved here in 1931. So all my uncles, my aunts, my dad, they all went to Amador. So a lot of history.
And what sort of activities did you participate in when you were in high school?
High school, I played basketball and baseball. Primarily, baseball was my main sport, but I played a little bit of basketball also. A little bit involvement in student government.
Well, you were like really a pretty good baseball player, weren't you?
Decent. Yeah, decent enough to keep me interested for a while and keep me in school long enough for me to grow up and mature and figure out that I needed to emphasize or put a little more emphasis in my schoolwork to end up in a profession that I wanted to spend some time in and have some passion for.
What position did you play in?
I was a pitcher in college.
So when you graduated from Amador, where did you go to college?
First, I went to Chabot Community College. Primary the focus was baseball. That led me to Chabot. Very good baseball program there. Had pretty good success as a team there.
So you ultimately graduated from where? What college?
Cal State University Sacramento.
And where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at University of Pacific, McGeorge School of Law.
Did you go directly from college into McGeorge?
I did, yes. My undergrad took 5 years. I was 2 years at Chabot and then 3 years at Sac State. And then when I graduated with my degree in criminal justice from Sac State, I went straight to McGeorge.
So how was that experience at McGeorge?
It was very good. It was a very small law school. It's part of University of Pacific out of Stockton, but the law school is actually in Sacramento. So that's heavy emphasis on government, a lot of ties to, the state government, a lot of professors with ties to government. So it was a very good experience for me there.
When did you first start thinking about going to law school?
I kind of evolved. I was a criminal justice major, but I did not want to become in law enforcement per se. I then started thinking about the FBI. Then I realized to be a field agent, you needed primarily to have a law degree. And I figured, well, if I'm going to go to law school, I wasn't going to go to the FBI. Then my thoughts, Lee Steinberg spoke, I think it was my senior year of college. I saw him speak. Lee Steinberg was a sports agent out of Cal Berkeley. So he gave a speech, and then I thought about becoming a sports agent, and that's kind of what initially drove me to law school. And then in law school, I got very interested in trial work and the criminal justice part of my education there with the evidence and criminal procedure. And that's where it kind of focused me to pursue a career in the criminal side of the legal work.
It's really interesting how people evolve in terms of their interests and their careers, all within the, sort of general legal world framework.
Yeah, it was, when I got to law school, I think the mock trial and the trial work and things of that nature, it kind of satisfied my competitive urges, I guess, that I maybe still have left over from competing in, college athletics.
Right.
So that's when I kind of found an outlet for that. And, it did provide me with some success in my trial work. Initially, when I went to the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office out of law school, tried a lot of cases down there, which, given the volume that they have in Los Angeles County, it's pretty well.
How did you go from McGeorge in Sacramento to Los Angeles County District Attorney?
Just, during the interview process, I was interviewing with primarily district attorney's offices, and they had a senior law clerk program through the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. And they accepted me and had some other friends moving down to Southern California. I was married at the time. I had got married after my second year of law school. My wife ended up getting a job down in Southern California, so we decided to take a shot and move down there.
How did that work out?
It worked out very good. It was a great office, opportunity for a lot of experience. As I mentioned, quite a bit of volume of criminal cases coming through the office. So if you wanted to work, there was definitely the work there for you. It was fun. You could just go down to one of the calendar departments, hang out, talk to the calendar deputies. They would tell you, hey, this case here might be going to trial this afternoon. And you start reading it, and next thing you know, 3 hours later, you're in trial. So it was a great experience, a lot of great training opportunities. The DA's office at that time had some tremendous career deputy prosecutors, just with some phenomenal experience. So I enjoyed my time there immensely.
There's something to be said for working in a really busy, big city office.
Yeah, like I mentioned, the opportunity to sit down and speak to a DA, fellow prosecutor has 30 years of experience when you're, in your second year in the office is a phenomenal opportunity.
How long were you at the Los Angeles DA's office before you came to Alameda County?
I actually joined Alameda County the day before Loma Prieta.
Wow.
So I was in LA for about 2 years, came up here in October, started on a Monday down in Oakland. And the second day was the Loma Prieta, the first day of the World Series. Or no, I'm sorry, it was game 3 of the World Series, I think.
I remember that. So how long did you stay in Alameda County DA's office?
A short time. We were trying to sell our house down in Southern California. I was doing the Southwest airline commute. So I was working up here. I'd fly home for the weekend. My wife was still down there. We just had our first child, was about 5 months, 6 months old. So that part was a little difficult. So I did that for probably about 5 months, and we just never were able to sell our home down in Southern California. So eventually I went back to LADA, stayed there another 5 years, and then eventually moved back to Alameda County and started my own practice at that time.
So your stint in the Alameda County DA's office was fairly short.
Yeah, about probably 5 months, I would guess. I think it was from October to February I started in October of 1989. And then I think I went back to LADA sometime around February or March of 1990.
Well, they must have really liked you in LA if they took you back that easily.
Well, there was kind of a joke with my boss at the time. He said when I left, he said if it didn't work out, to give him a call. And from the time I left to the time I gave him the call back, he'd been appointed to assistant deputy district attorney. So he was like the number 3 guy in the office, which kind of eased my transition back into the office.
Well, it's good to have friends in high places.
It certainly worked out at that time for me.
What do you really like about practicing law?
The opportunity, I know, in both sides, really, as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, the opportunity to help somebody when they're in a tough spot. Given on the prosecutor side, you're dealing more so with the victims, but it's a difficult time in their lives for them. And then on the defense side, you're dealing with somebody who's in a difficult position, and you're trying to help them out as best you can. Protect them, either from a victim standpoint or one who has been charged with a criminal act.
Well, at some point you left the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, and where did you go from there?
During my time in Alameda County, I met Jim McGrail, who I mentioned previously, and we'd run into each other over the years when I was still down in Los Angeles. And he said if I ever come back to look him up, he had moved on to private practice. I gave Jim a call, and that's when I started my own practice and went out and started doing criminal defense work.
How did that go initially?
It went well. For me, it was easier to deal with a criminal than it was some of the divorced people I was working with.
Yeah, well, they say that in criminal law, you see bad people at their best, and in family law, you see good people at their worst.
Yeah, but for me, it was easier dealing with the bad people at their best, I guess, if that's the same. Yeah, no, for the most part, criminals, people charged with crimes, primarily, percentage-wise, they're guilty. And when you deal with people who've been through the system a few times, they know the game is just about as well as you do.
How did you feel about moving from being a criminal prosecutor to being on the other side of things?
It was not that difficult for me. I made a commitment to my wife primarily that I wouldn't do homicide as a defense attorney. But the way I viewed it is I believe in the system, and I felt my job primarily as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney is to make sure the system works. It works the way it's supposed to be. I was trained as a prosecutor to always do the right thing.
Do you think the legal system is fair?
Well, there's the human element involved, Lou, so that always plays a significant role. The power of the government is unmatched by a criminal defendant, and no matter their wealth. And unfortunately, we deal with a lot of people who don't have the wealth to fight the government.
What about the business of practicing law? How's that gone for you, and how is it either met or differed from expectations that you may have had about it?
That's been probably the biggest challenge. They don't have classes in law school on, how to run a business, criminal defense practice or anything of that nature. I think it was beneficial that I hooked up with Jim McGrail. He keeps coming up in this conversation, but he played a pretty big role with me. Jim was a very successful businessman and attorney. So I think, sharing office space with him for 5 or 6 years that I did, he helped me tremendously in that respect. I've also been fortunate that, my wife is also employed. So the financial pressures of, just being solely placed upon me as I pursue my practice was not always there. So that definitely made things easier for me.
How has practicing law affected your family life? I mean, you have a wife, you have kids.
I think there's been some positives and probably some challenges. The positives is when I became a private defense attorney, it made it possible at times to control your own calendar. So I was able to manage that as best I could and be part of things my kids were interested in growing up, coaching Little League and things of that nature with my kids and being there for them as best I could. So that was probably the main positive from a personal standpoint, was the ability to control your own calendar. and be there for my kids and my wife as best I could.
Is there anything that you know now that you really wished you knew before you started the endeavor of practicing law?
I think, having spent the time in the DA's office as a prosecutor, I dealt with defense attorneys, so I kind of had a pretty good idea. I think the main thing that I did not anticipate coming back from LA is that I did not have the professional relationships with the legal community here in Alameda County. So I didn't know most of the prosecutors, didn't know most of the defense attorneys, knew very few of the bench officers. So I think that was a challenge for me in the early part. Obviously, that has changed through the years as I have established those relationships. But I think initially that was probably one of the things I did not anticipate, and I thought would be a lot easier for me. But there was definitely a period of transition there. Having those personal relationships is really quite important, don't you think? I do. And I think everybody has kind of a little bit different twist on how they approach the defense of their client. But I think it does start with those relationships. That's often why many times I've referred friends to seek counsel in a local community if they picked up a case some ways away. If I felt that there might be a better opportunity for a local attorney to provide a better resolution for them, I've just certainly discussed that with those people in those situations. But the relationships do play a pretty significant role, I think, and I believe it's been a big part of the success that I've had. Yeah, I think that it has too, both for you and for myself. I mean, I think that, knowing the people you're dealing with and having some kind of trust and relationship with them, whether they're DAs or co-counsel or judges, it's very important to have that understanding of the other individuals. Yeah, I think as you go through the process with the local attorneys and the judges, as you mentioned, you get a feeling for what they value, what they believe is important. You've heard other counsel present arguments in defense of their client. Some prosecutors are more receptive to drug treatment programs. Some are not. So you get a feel for which ones may be receptive to certain types of arguments, and you figure out the best way to present those to each individual prosecutor. Have you had any travel experience outside the state, outside the country that you'd like to share? I was fortunate to have two of my kids play college golf. Wow. So through their travels or their careers as college athletes and even junior golfers, went on some pretty good trips. My daughter was invited to play in a tournament in St. Andrews, Scotland. So we turned that into a family boondoggle. But my wife and I, we've traveled a little bit, not nearly as much as we've liked to, but been to Europe a few times. Would certainly hope to do that. I was planning on doing that last year, but that did not work out. And then I guess not. We have a place in Maui, so we go to Hawaii quite a bit. Try and get over there three times, 4 times a year. Oh, that's nice. That's great. Yeah. What sort of recreational pursuits do you enjoy? I mean, I know you grew up playing baseball and your kids are involved in golf, but what about for yourself now? I play a little bit of golf, so that's primarily my main activity. I like to go to Tahoe, do some hiking, and I used to hunt quite a bit with my dad growing up in Pleasanton. We hunted quite a bit around here, just upland game birds, and then hunted out of Tahoe for quite a bit for deer. So I like to go into the backcountry, either just hiking or I have a 1953 Willys. Really? Yeah. So I like to take that back into the backcountry and just try and, go some places where not too many people have been. That's one of my dream vehicles. Does it have the fold down windshield? It does. Yes, it does. So yeah, that's my dad picked that up in the late 60s. He bought that, and so we had it for a number of years, and then he finally gave it to me. That's a very fun little vehicle.
If you couldn't be a lawyer, is there some other job or profession that you think you would like to do?
It might be teaching. You know, I've enjoyed. I know you mentioned at the top there that I have a little bit of a focus on juveniles. So that's been something I've enjoyed working with. I've enjoyed coaching, and then I've enjoyed the juvenile part of my practice.
What is about the juvenile practice that has attracted you?
I think it's just the opportunity to try and help somebody. You know, you have young kids. I certainly, as a young kid, made some poor choices. And, I try and do the best I can to make sure that the mistake that they made that brought them to that particular time and place, that it has a minimal impact on their future going forward.
Yeah, I think in the juvenile court, you really can catch people before they've moved into behaviors that are going to create criminal problems for them for the rest of their lives. And I think it does feel really good to be able to intervene on some level at that point.
Yeah, so that's probably where I would have ended up, as in teaching or, some type of coaching. I coached when I left Sac State my first year of McGeorge. I coached a freshman high school baseball team up in Sacramento, and that was a lot of fun. So that may have been the path that I took if the legal side didn't work out. If
you came into some real money, let's say you came into $3 or $4 billion, what, if anything, would you do differently in your life?
I would definitely set up some foundations to try and do some things to help people as best I could, starting with the juveniles in lower income communities. That's something I've always thought of trying to do if I ever did come into a bunch of money.
Let's say you had a magic wand. There was one thing in the world that you could change, legal or otherwise. What would that be?
Well, I think right now, obviously, it would have to do something with this virus. If I had something where I had the power to get rid of this last year, I have an 89-year-old mother, and I'm sure there's lots of people that have the challenges that have gone through this last year just been unimaginable. But my, mother's pretty much been in the house for a year. But yeah, if there's one thing I could change, I think it would be this last year.
Where do you see yourself going professionally forward?
That's a very good question, Lou. I'm in the process of slowing down a little bit, I think, right now. So I'm looking perhaps for my next challenge, next chapter. Still staying involved in criminal defense, but probably not quite as involved as I am right now. But that's something I'm trying to figure out. I turn 60 here in about a month and a half. So I'm trying to figure out where the next journey will take me.
Dean Shotwell, thank you so much for joining me today on the Love Thy Lawyer podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Lewis, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you thinking about me and reaching out. It was very enjoyable.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. If you enjoyed listening, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the podcast. If you have comments or suggestions, send me an email. I promise I'll respond. Take a look at our website at lovethylawyer.com, where you can find all of our episodes, transcripts, photographs, and information. Thanks as always to my guests who share their wisdom, and to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman.
Part of my job to fight as best I can to protect my clients from being overwhelmed by the government.